$200,000 of it, and we built a youth wing, and we dedicated it in his name, and I just feel like that was a better use. But I put $200,000 in there. The Presbyterian minister was like, "Oh, man, I'm glad you told me. I feel much better." We kept $500,000 out and gave it to missions. We just thought, God's ordained it. He's given it. He's placed it in our hands, and if we do it, then it falls in His sovereign will, and so we've done it. The rabbi was furious. The rabbi's like, "I cannot believe you guys didn't fulfill this man's request." I'm like, "Well, wait, did you put the $1 million in there?" He goes, "I wrote him a personal check." Okay, that's not recorded. Did you hear about the Baptist and the Presbyterian minister trying to get rid of squirrels? Did you hear that one? Oh, they were at one of the Ministerial Alliance meetings. This Presbyterian minister like, "I got squirrels all up in our attic of our church. Don't know what to do." Baptist minister said, "We had squirrels. You know how I got rid of them?" Like, "No, made them members." That's just off the cuff. I had to, All right, we're going to record this because there's several people unable to make it. So, you good?
Yeah. All right. Clip on that. The microphone gods might not like that though. And Bo doesn't have to mess with it either. Maybe that'll work. You got your glasses on? There's another page.
Press that one when you start.
There's another page that's got the graph of that stuff a little bigger, but that's as big as I could make it. Okay. So, we wanted to, the diaconate as well as the session wanted to just kind of get everybody together and kind of discuss where we are now, what the future's looking like, and from a financial standpoint of the church, as well as the future of the church. As everybody knows, a few months ago, we bought this building and the property. And so with that, we wanted to circle back around and just kind of talk about where we're at from a financial standpoint, as well as, I'm not on them, but many of you are on committees and stuff that are starting the planning process of, the future and looking at the building and the expansion and all that entailed with that. Some of you guys have been meeting with the Generis folks. And so, as you all know, like last month, we decided that, what's best, let's put pause on that for a little bit and let's circle back around. Let's shore up some of the finances of the church, get a little safety net in there before we then move forward. We've always been lucky. God has always provided. He's always taken care of, and we thought, right now, for our mission, it's best to kind of put pause on this for a little bit until we kind of shore up the church's finances, and then we move forward. So what I want to do is just kind of give you a quick rundown of where we're at, so that everybody understands, for one, the sky is not falling. It's not like we're going to shut the doors next month, but going forward, looking at future projections, we just need to shore up some of our stuff, get on a little more solid footing financially, and then we move forward with those plans. Because the worst thing to do is try to jump into that head first right now, and then 2 months down the road be like, well, sorry, now we're stuck. We're halfway through some agreements and contracts that we have that we're liable for, so we want to make sure we have all that up front before we move forward. So a couple of things. He switched to the other page that has my notes. Let me pull it up. So what I wanted to show here is, for one, these are kind of overall projections the last 5 years of where we are as a church, right? So I want you guys to understand that we are doing fine, for the most part. Yes, we can't go dump a couple $100,000 into starting the building process right now, but we will get there. But I want everybody to understand where we came from and where we're at now and how awesome this is. We've got a few years prior to 2017. Some of that was before we were in the building and before Mark was here. And so I started with 2017. I want you guys to look at the first line is external giving. So that's not us giving from outside sources, from donate, people who's donated to the church from outside of the local members. Local giving and tithes and offerings, that's the local church. And then there's a total there, and then I put expenses under that. So one of the things I want to point out, if you guys look at 2017, if you can see it, external giving was $110,000 that we got that first year from outside sources. And local tithes was only $83,000. And as you kind of go across there, what we had planned has kind of came along where external giving has kind of came down, and our local giving has kind of came up as membership grows, as a church grows. 2020, we were at $178,000. We went from $83,000 to $178,000 in 3 years of local giving. $100,000 additional giving from us in 3 years, which is amazing. In 2021, we're at 192. And so I know we went through COVID 2020, 2021, and this year we've kind of had a little bit of a hangover from that, I think. So yes, there's amazing growth there, and we just, this year projection-wise from last year and a little bit from you, we've kind of started getting that plateau a little bit. So that's not a bad thing, but this is something everybody needs to keep in mind. And as you think about your own giving, where are you at on that? Are we all kind of plateaued? Just kind of review that and look at that, because we are starting to kind of plateau a little bit, which is just kind of the maturing of in a roundabout way, a new business, right? We're just kind of hitting that mark, so now it's time to take it to the next level and to keep growing. So on expenses wise, I know that's one of the things that always comes up as well that we wanted to kind of walk through. Early on, really we just had one pastoral salary and benefits and stuff that we had to, that we were responsible for. And as we grew, we needed more help, right? And so through 2018 to 2019, we had a music leader we started paying some. We started paying Jake a little bit for youth pastor, because he was spending more and more time in doing that. But essentially, really, it was about 1 day a week worth of pay, right? And then as we continued to grow, we got to where we needed. They were spending way more time than that, and so we wanted to compensate them for that. So they kind of grew to about 2 days a week worth of pay. Jake went from a half a day to now essentially being paid for 2 days a week, and which we all know does way more than that. But that's essentially where we've at. So we've grown from, especially 2017 to now, in 5 years. We went from one pastoral salary to essentially a pastor's salary and a full-time employee for the most part. I mean, we're essentially paying 4 days a week. So between Jake and David. So we essentially have a whole nother full-time employee there as the expenses have grown. So that's part of the reason why we've grown. And I put this, I know the numbers are hard to see with the graph. Some people are numbers people. Some people like the lines in the graphs. So as you see, like the yellow line, the expenses, they do climb some. That's part of the reason for the climb. Of course, the other costs, utilities and other things has gone up, and the more the building gets used, the more utilities have, right? When we first moved in here, we had Sunday, and that was it, like all week. Well, now with youth group and other stuff going on during the week, we're heating the building more, we use electricity more, and that stuff just goes up. That's just part of it. The other thing, the last thing is external givings went down. Out there on the far right side, the 2022, it says at 10/31, so that's the last full month's worth of financial statements that's been put through the accountants have worked. They usually take a couple weeks in the next month. So, you see external giving is, I know it's a lot lower than it was last year, but it's because we haven't reached out. Like, we're trying to mature and we haven't really went after those or talked to those donors and stuff that's in the past because we're slowly growing our numbers. But one thing I wanted to point out was where we are as local giving at the end of October versus where we hope to be, I guess. So local giving, like I said, we've plateaued some, but that's not the end of the world. Just kind of circle back around, look at your own giving. A couple of things on expenses. Yes, when we bought the property, yes, we have a mortgage and stuff on it. This is our building now, for the church. There were a few more expenses with that. We're roughly between insurance and the mortgage payments and stuff. We're about $1,000 more a month than we were before, which is not that, in a $280,000 budget. That's not really that big of a deal, and it's our building now, which is awesome. So running totals of expenses are roughly about, for the church, everything involved is about $20,000 a month. So that's how we kind of get to that 251. So one of the things that I guess, what else was there? So when we first bought the building the last few months, we started with Generis. We've started, we got in agreement with them. Our expenses are about $20,000 a month. We're bringing in, at the time, donations-wise, 16 to 17. So we knew there was a deficit there, but we knew that would happen. That's common in the fall till we get the end of year giving to have a little bit of a deficit. But we as a diaconate thought, you know what, let's put a pause on the funding of that stuff. And so I know some of you guys are on committees and stuff that has been meeting and starting to put that together, and we've kind of paused that. I just want you guys to know, don't panic. We've paid to Generis part of that, and we've talked to them, and we've just put all that on hold for now. So we knew we were in a deficit by a few $1,000s a month, or $5,000 a month, and so their services were essentially $3,000 a month. So we decided, let's put a pause on that. So that immediately brings us back a lot closer to where we're in a balanced cash flow. But that's not saying we're not going forward with the plans. We're still looking at those plans, still working forward on that. Essentially, from a planning perspective, the next step is we've got an architectural firm I think Bo's talked about. They've kind of got the plan together how we're going to have to pay that out over steps along the way. And essentially the next step for us, and that we're to the point that we're ready to fundraise. All we do is hit the button and say go, cut a check to the architects, and we kind of start that process. But we want to be solid before we do that from a financial standpoint. So overall, right now, I think in Edwards Jones account, we've got roughly about $9,600 in there. That's just our safety net, roughly 10 grand. So, that'll make a half a month's payroll. And then we've got enough in the checking account separate from that to make make a month's worth of payroll. But that's about it right now. So but we talked about that several months ago, right? This summer, we knew we were going to be tight. We knew we were going to have some cash flow concerns, but we're making it. We're making it. We just right now we can't take on the extra load of all that other stuff. So don't panic that we're going to shut the doors, I guess to say. So.
Rick, I echo on that. That money at Edward Jones had not been touched for quite some time since we bought the building. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. And a lot of that money has been given, in 17, 18, 19, those were some external stocks and stuff that people gave to us that at the time we decided, you know what, we don't need this right now. So let's just leave it in that separate account and hold on to it for a rainy day. And that's essentially where we're at, right? So that's why we use some of that. We use some of that as addition, for putting a down payment on the building and stuff. So we've got that cushion. We were just, as the diaconate and as the session, we were just getting to the point to where it's okay, let's just put pause on this. Let's shore everything back up, and then we'll move forward from there. So we're still at a part where all we do is just really flip a switch and go with the addition of the building. So we're there. We just need to build back before we go forward. So a goal right now, I would, as a diaconate and session, we've talked about wanting to shore back up if we can, $50,000 to $60,000 kind of in that savings account. $60,000 would be great, because then, we got roughly $20,000 a month of expenses. That's 3 months worth of expenses. As I know, a business is a lot of times different than personal finance, but from a personal finance standpoint, whatever I talk about, having 3 to 6 months of emergency fund, right? So if we can get $60,000 in the savings account back into a money market or something like that, we've got 3 months worth of savings there in the emergency account. Then from there, I think I don't want to jump on Bo too much, but ahead of us, but we're roughly looking at $36,000 for the architects firms to finish up drawings and plans and all the stuff they have to do pre-construction. So big picture, what we want to do is build back, if we can get back to about $60,000 in savings. So we've got that cushion, got that emergency fund, and then the next step is probably that $36,000 for the architects to get the planning process started. Because there's a lot of planning process that has to happen before we even get to the point of, okay, let's break ground and find contractors and do all that. So there's a lot more work ahead of time than just grabbing some shovels and start digging a footing. So a lot more, especially when you deal with business and the city and codes and everything else. So anyways, did I hit everything? I think so. Okay. Now I'll let Bo go for it. When you're done, stop the recording.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so what's the scripture say? Many are a man's plans in his heart, but the Lord determines his steps, right? I want y'all to go back to 2017. Local tithes and offerings, $83,000. Many were the plans in our heart. Half of you weren't even here, and the Lord has determined our steps to this point. The place that we find ourselves today, we found ourselves, I don't know, half a dozen times in the last, 5 years. Just we don't generally just come out and be like, hey, yeah, the savings account got down to $20,000 this month. We had to pull money out of that savings account to get here or there. Those things happen. And I would push that back kind of on us as I think back to Vanessa and I were really young and we were just getting started, and like most of you, we had an intention that we were going to build some landscaping and shrubs around our first home we ever bought. And boy, I had a great plan to do that, and then I can't remember, one or the other of us got sick, and then we had to go spend $500 savings we had on flu medicine. Then we were broke again, and then I was like, yes, but there is the zero interest thing at Sutherland's. Yeah. So I went out and took on $1,200 worth of zero interest debt to build some shrubs and landscaping beds around my house, right? I wasn't going to do that. I had the money to go do it in my pocket, and then stuff happens, right? Things happen to all of us personally. Well, things happen to the church too. That's kind of where we find ourselves today. This isn't any different than any other business venture or any other personal venture that we go on. The Lord determines our steps. And, sitting here knowing the conversations that I had with many astute men and many wise men before we hired Mark, before we left that barn, when we rented this building and signed a 3-year lease agreement on it. And they were like, you know what you're getting into? Yeah, we got $80,000 in our budget's $189,000 that first year. Yeah, I realize we're gonna have to raise $100,000, but the Lord did that. Same way we're gonna move forward with plans with this building, and as the Lord determines our steps, He'll raise that money for us too. Same way we sit today, and in wisdom, right? We're not running around in folly. So I can't remember, we spoke about this, in August. And I remember sitting here at our meeting and saying, hey, listen, this is going to zero us out more or less in our savings. We don't like to function like that. I don't like to function like that at home. Ricky for sure doesn't like to function like that in the church. I think that's probably a good thing, get an old farmer and a kid from Sallisaw, and then we try to blend this theory of how much money we ought to have in the bank. I'm of the side, since I probably gamble a little more, that could be about 25,000. Rick's more in the 60 lane. Right? So that's where we're going, because I defer to him because he's wise, when we talked about that, we knew we were going to need to put $60,000 in the bank to feel good about where we were going in the future. But that was the plan in our heart. That seemed wise at the time. We spoke about that in our meeting, and you know what's happened since we spoke about that? We didn't get $60,000 in. That's the only difference in our plan then and our plan today, right? So we had to step back and make a hard decision as a session and go, okay, where are we then in our building process? Well, here's where we are. We've got great plans. We've met with Alan that can help us fundraise. We see the roadmap of where we're going now. So it's a time to go, okay, let's save $3,000 a month on what we're paying Alan because we got a good stopping point there, right? Jason and I have done a lot of work meeting with the architects, putting together some temporary discussion or preliminary discussion on what the building could look like, where that could go. And we had to spend the same time that the steering committee was meeting and meeting with Alan for the $3,000 a month. They're putting their plans together. Jason and I were putting plans together. So where we end up is I come back and I'm like, okay, we finally got our bid on what this would cost to draw the architectural plans. We can't go raise any money unless we can show somebody what we're building. Like I wouldn't give money to something like, yeah, good luck, guys. We don't do that in business. We don't do things without budgets. We don't do things without plans. So the next step then became, all right, well, we got to come up with, about 36,000 or so to get some more survey work done, to do some more testing and to draw these initial set of plans up to begin to move forward. And Rick said, well, we've got 9,000 in the bank. And I said, okay, well, we're going to have to wait for the Lord to provide the next step. And that's the only place we are. That's where we're at right now. We're waiting on the Lord to provide the funding for the next step. In wisdom, we believe that is going to be about, anywhere from $86,000 to $96,000. That's kind of about what we're going to want to see raised before we move forward. Isn't that funny though? Isn't that the irony of that is that's almost exactly what when we started our budget was, and how much local giving we had. Just a handful of people here. Back when everybody said, hey, you know what you're doing? Well, we think. We'll trust the Lord. We'll apply wisdom, and we'll move forward. And that's what we did, and that's where we are today. And so many people, I think as a session, one of the things that we've talked about now, we're going to start being, well, I don't know that transparent's the right word, but we're just going to start communicating more with you. We're kind of to that point now as a church. We're starting to move into own our own property, and that we need to just have more conversations about where we are financially. So we're going to start doing that more. That's one of the things we've kind of learned in this. As businesses grow, as families grow, as we mature, we understand, okay, well, our needs today are different than they were. We've got more people to communicate with. I mean, back then it was literally 5 families or something. There wasn't a whole lot of folks here, Now there's a whole lot of people here. There's a lot of people that take an interest and want to see what we're doing. So we feel very good about where we are. I'm excited to raise that money because I really, really can't wait to show y'all what these architects can do with what this could look like. I mean, Jason and I got this rudimentary drawing of things, and it's like I'm standing in the parking lot looking at it from a 3D perspective, and it was just awesome. I mean, it didn't even have anything on it. There wasn't any landscaping, there wasn't any, the building was just corrugated metal. That's all they put on. He's like, this isn't the final plan. I'm like, I get it, man, but you've shown me, I can see the vision. I've had a chance to see what it could be, and I can't wait till we can show that to you guys, and then we can all grab a hold of it together and purpose plans in our heart, and we'll see where the Lord wants to take us. So first step, we need to raise about $86,000 to $96,000, somewhere in that neighborhood. Okay, we do that, then we're going to move on to the next step. In the meantime, we'll continue with some of the planning we started with Alan. That's not going to cost us $3,000 a month, but things where we can get a lot of work done behind the scenes, so that when we raise that money and we hit go, we can begin to really move. We're not losing any time right now. So we'll go as far as we can go with where we are today without spending any additional money while we wait to raise that money. So that's kind of my best effort at summarizing what Rick's put together for you guys there. From a personal perspective. As I've stood before you in the past, I've talked to you about the different ways that God's asked me to trust him in my life over the years. One of the things, if you remember from some of our call to confession, one of those is with the Sabbath. God asked me years ago to trust him with my time. taking the Sabbath day and really making it holy, truly dedicating it to him, walking away from my work and my labor. You know, I used to spend a whole lot of time on a Sunday night getting caught up on email and everything else so I could hit the ground running on a Monday morning. And what I learned from that was when God said, yeah, you're not really making this holy, Bo. You're not separating your work from me, and I'm asking you to do that. That's what my command is in that Sabbath day, and you're not doing it. So I said, well, Lord, do you understand what you're going to do to my Monday morning? Like, this could be a catastrophe. You understand how hard my week might be if I can't keep up? And he said, I absolutely understand what that is. And I'm asking you to trust me that my ways are better than yours. 5 years ago, 6 years ago, I started doing that. And you know, it's been some of the most tremendous peace I've ever had in my life to watch God work through my week. And I don't need my Sunday nights anymore to catch up and get ahead. I don't need to do that anymore because he's planned the other 6 days perfectly, where I can be a father, I can be a husband, I can be a churchman, I can be a businessman, I can be a coach. He worked every bit of that out, every bit of it. The other place in my life that God's challenged me to trust him is with his money that I see as mine. I can tell you time and time again that I've been tempted to not trust him with that. Over and over. I've been a believer now, walking with him for 18 years. I was thinking of that earlier. I was the bad kid. I was overwhelmed at that last song, Heidi, thank you, wherever, guys, thank you. I was sobbing because I was overwhelmed at how much Jesus loved the bad kid. And has all these years. And you know, the hard part as we grow in that is like when you're the bad kid, you just sit on the back row when you come to know Jesus and be like, man, I made it. I'm not drunk. I'm here. You know, I kind of quit cussing a whole lot this week. I read my Bible 4 times. Man, this is awesome, right? And then as you mature over that 18 years and those things begin to change in your life, and then God starts taking these other little things, these things that we see as little, but they're huge, like Sabbath day and tithing and offering. And he begins to teach you more things in your heart about how we hold on to our treasures so tightly. And now he wants our full trust with those. With the 2 things that we love the most, think about it. If there's no way you can escape this, like I can't, your time and your money. So 2 things we love the most. 2 things we serve the most in our lives. Doesn't matter if, so what I will tell you is for God, for me right now, he's working on me to offer. He's working on me to offer. To be a man that offers more, that gives up more to offer more. For some of you, that may be the case too. For some of you, your giving may be consistent. You may have lived in this world of the tithe and giving for years. For me, that's something that we've done. But now God's saying, hey, would you give up more of what you want for more of what this kingdom that I'm have established already in this place needs? Put this beautiful, beautiful thing ahead of so that just people in this community can see it. For some of you, it may be that God's asking you to just begin to give consistently. See, it's all relative, right? Like it truly is relative principle. For some of us, but the core behind every bit of it is God's asking us to trust him. That's the heart behind it, is to say, hey, would you come and would you offer more, Bo? Would you come and would you just simply give consistently, whomever that may be? You can trust me. I'm a good father. I'm a good father, and I love you, and I want you to grow more than just in the places of, what you're giving up. I want you to see what you're gaining in this. I want you to experience more of me. You see, because after you've been a believer for a long time like that, that's the places God reminds you that you used to be the bad kid, and he's rescued you. He's rescued you with Jesus. And because he rescues me, I can continue to trust him over and over and over with all these other things that I don't think I see, or that I somehow in my heart I think I have control over, and I really don't. That's the challenge that I'm just simply confessing to you today. That's where God's got me. Asking me to give up some things personally to give more. And I'm just being transparent with you. I'm going to ask each of you to do the same thing. Ask your own selves where God wants you to trust him with the resources that he's given you. Because that first year, man, there was a whole lot of trust in that first year, right? And we've moved to this point now that we could have sat in a place and said, well, we'll just leave that money in the bank, keep renting this deal. And boy, it sure is easy to trust when you got a big pad like that sitting in the bank, just is. That's just the reality of it. So I'm excited. Let me say this one other thing that I wanted to tell you all. God's already blessed me richly in this place. There was a time Jason and I sat on a porch and talked about how God he didn't care about a little old place like this in Grove. We weren't ever going to have a church like this in Grove that believed the things that we believe, that focused on the things we focus on. And I was the first person to say, he's not going to do that. So what we have already, I'm already richly blessed, what I've seen. But it took that step of faith. It took that trust of God, that even if you stumble, you won't fall face first. Remember that verse too? That's what he says. Step out, Bo, and walk and continue to pursue this, because even if it fails, you won't look like that big of a fool to this world. Even though in my heart, that's what I was afraid of. That's why I say today, having experienced this, having lived in it, I'm looking forward to another 5 years and see where we are. That all of you can take that same step of trust and faith that we did in 2017 along with us again and see what God does right here in this place. And you know what? Even if it's still just this and our savings is back, that's great. I'm all right with that too, I'm all right with whatever plan God puts in it and whatever plan he sees to fruition. Because I know he will. I know he will continue, that he who called us will continue to hold us and keep us, and he who built his church on the back of his son will continue to see it flourish in this place. I know that. So, are there any questions before we adjourn our meeting today? About the budget, about anything like that? The graph's pretty good, it's straight line. You can kind of see the yellow line's kind of where our expenses tracked and have tracked. That's pretty, to me, that's pretty solid. The blue line's kind of where our external giving has gone, and we've begun to rely less and less on it. The red line's where our local giving has tracked to go up, and then now kind of plateaued, as Ricky said. We want to answer any questions that you have, if you have any more about anything that you've seen.
What's the gap we make up just for this year, the last 2 months?
Yeah, so if you notice that, so this far right column, total general fund offering, Ricky annualized those. That was through 10/31. So the left, 2022 estimated at current giving level. And there's your delta, Jason. We've got 202 projected total at current giving, the way the consistent month over month giving that's come in. The 202,200, that's where we project will be. So our delta's about, what was that, 29,000? 39,000 between, I guess 49 in the total expense, $251,000 for the estimated. Now, in that 251,000 total expenses is about 22,000 in one-time costs. Generis, what that's cost us, and closing costs of 10,000 to get the building done. So we're at actual giving on month to month, we're really at about on a normal budget expenses, we're at about 230, and our delta then would be about 18 grand or so on month over month. But to start catching up, because what he's got in that 251 total expense are those other $30,000 worth of expenses there. So we're roughly in that ballpark of about 30 grand. Oh, did you? Okay. Yeah. Oh, is that what it was? Okay. Yeah. So that is right then. So the delta is 30 or 40. What is that? 49,000 or so. Current tracking. Good question. Any other questions? These guys are easy. I will. Let's pray together. Father in heaven, greatest thing that you ever have done for all of us, Lord, is to send your Son to give us hope, to wipe our slate clean, God, to give us the record that is his before you, to call us sons and daughters. And man, we are simply your sons and daughters, Lord, going through this place, doing the best we can to see, to hope, to envision, to trust you, to ask you which way we ought to go. Man, we've got this, we've got things in front of us that we hope for. We've got things in front of us that put us in a place today where we continue to rest in you and need your help to provide, just like you always have. So we just ask you, Lord, to continue to remind us of that, of where we are, of that we are your sons and daughters, that you do care and love for us, that you do provide for your children, and how much we can have faith that as you clothe the lilies of the field, Lord, that you will take care of us and our needs. And so what a wonderful thing that we can rest in, that you knew that we would be in places in life where we could be afraid, or we could see what was on the horizon. And you give us promises like that in your word, God. Would you help us believe them? Would you help us to rest in them, God? Help us to celebrate today, not what we see or needs that you've yet to provide, Lord, but just the things you've done in our lives and in our hearts to save us and redeem us. The hope that you give us for a future, God. Pray we could rest in that in Jesus' name. Amen. Hey, one other thing. Aren't you going on like a fundraising trip like next week or something? Yeah. Pard's going out to get back from the 20 up to the 100 again. So
Hey,
he's going to go raise a bunch.
I don't know if I could real quick. I should have said this beforehand. End of the year giving, I know stocks haven't done very well recently, but it's more of loss harvesting than gain saving. But if anybody who has stocks that want to donate stocks and stuff, you can get a hold of me, or Justin Chismar is the one that funnels all that through Edwards Jones for us. So you get a hold of him, he can get you the info. That way you can not have some capital gains tax and that sort of stuff you have to worry about. So you can get with Justin, he can